Well, hello Quilty friends. Today is January 9th, 2024, and it is day one kickoff week for the Riley Blake block challenge, and my block happens to be for week one. My block is called Vintage Charm, and we're doing 10-inch blocks, and yes, this is a 20-inch block, so I'll talk about that in a minute. But so there's going to be 16 10-inch blocks, and 16 different Riley Blake designers are doing them, and then there's going to be a quilt setting that you can put them in. The quilt setting is a mystery, but I can tell you it is consists of 16 10-inch blocks. So every Tuesday, Riley Blake on their website and on their blog and on Instagram and all of that stuff, you know, all the good social media stuff, will reveal the next block. So today's block, Vintage Charm, designed by me, was revealed today. And so I'm going to show you how I sew my block. Everybody sews blocks differently, but I always have, you know, traditional ways and maybe not so traditional ways to do different blocks. And Cindy will always do a tutorial on the Riley Blake YouTube channel, on their channel, and I will put a link to that to show you how to do this block, and then I'm going to show you how I do mine. And so in the past I have shown you how to do a 20-inch block and given you the cutting for that, and so I thought I would continue that tradition. And so here's the 20-inch block. I am sewing sewing with Mercantile, my latest fabric collection, which is just now hitting quilt shops, and I'm sewing with that for the whole entire quilt. And so I chose different prints from Mercantile, well, in a few same prints, like this one, right, is the same. And this is what is going to consist of my 10-inch block, okay? And so I just have a few extra background squares because I did some of these segments. I began some of the segments first. And then these squares right here, I have already marked from corner to corner. And that's going to be these larger triangles here, okay? And so let's just jump right in. But once again, I'm going to link everything, all of the information that you need to know for this fun block challenge. And oh, I did one thing I wanted to tell you. I did say that they will be releasing a block every Tuesday starting today, except for the last Tuesday of every month. There's a break in between that, and gives you a chance to catch up or whatever. And so, all right, so let me talk about this little segment here. So instead of doing half square triangles first, I like to do my segments so that they look like this, and then I'm going to add the half square triangles. So the first thing that you need to do, and you would be doing this 4 times other than I have already done the other 3, is just sew the 2 squares together. And I'm just using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm using scrappy fabrics to sew in between right now instead of my bonus quilt, just because I'm filming. And I just quickly wanted to show you how I do this segment. Okay, first I set my seams, okay? And the reason I set my seams is because I want to squish those threads flat that are the bobbin and the upper thread from the sewing machine. I just want them as flat as possible. It helps you get a more accurate block. And then I use my quick press roller there and just open up those seams and, use 1 or 2 clappers and stack those on top of each other. Now I've already previously sewn this into a row, and then I will end up, after I do the easy corner triangle on all of these will just go into rows. Okay, I normally might let that cool just a little bit longer, but I think it's okay for right now. And then I'm going to take this rectangle here. I want to make sure that I am sewing this the right way. So if I put that there and I put that there, that's why I use design boards, so that I try not to make any mistakes by laying them out ahead of time. And then of course you can pin if you'd like to, if you're a pinner. I like to just start when they match up and make sure they match up at the end, and I just run it through. And then same thing goes for this one. I'm going to set my seams. right here, and see now that's nice and flat. There's no little wrinkles in there. I'm going to go ahead and open up, and I kind of just use my fingers to feel to make sure that's opened up all the way so that I can see those threads. And then especially where I've got little seams that meet here, I like to use that roller and press a little bit harder just to make sure that's all the way open. And then I go ahead and press. I try not to iron my blocks back and forth. I just try to press them and try to use a clapper that is cooled down already. And then while that's cooling, I'm going to grab these 2.5 inch squares that I have left, and I'm going to add the easy corner triangles onto that. Okay, so this is what it looks like. It looks like a little heart right now. Okay, and then we're going to turn it into a little tulip. And I like to do it this way because, you know, sometimes you have to do the half square triangles first, and that's fine. Sometimes you do not. Sometimes you can do it just a shape like this and then add them after. That means I don't have all those seams within the seams. I'm only making a seam afterwards. And I don't know, it's hard to explain, but you'll know what I'm talking about when when you go to do it. You'll see what I mean if you've done it the other way. There's really a lot of seams in one little area. Even though it's the same amount of fabric, the same amount of layers of fabric, they're placed differently depending on the order that you sew them. Maybe that's, the best way to describe it. And so also by pressing my seams open, then it just helps to lie flatter. And so all I do with my easy corner triangles, like I do with all of my blocks, is just line everything up. And I don't have to mark these smaller squares. You could if you wanted to, but I use my center line here of my Seam So Easy guide. And I just start in the corner right there. And then I just follow this corner right here on that center line. And that's exactly the same as marking it. And so you don't have to mark it. Now when I'm doing a larger block like this, then I do have to mark because, this line doesn't extend clear out. And so I go ahead and mark it. And of course I save all of those trimmings and put them in my scrappy stash, cut them into squares or whatever. And okay, so now once I've done this, before I trim these off, I check to make sure that it's accurate. And this to me, it looks like I didn't go all the way to the corner. I must have been, chatting a little bit too much. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run that through again and make sure that is on the corner. It's just a little bit off, but I just wanted to show you that's how I do it. And then because I'm going to press this seam open, I'm going to go ahead and take my seam ripper and just rip out. I'm going to put my glasses on though so I can see. I'm going to grab some readers. And there was just a few stitches on this outside here that I fixed, and went past. So I'm just going to take the tip of my seam ripper and pull out up to that point. I'm not pulling out the last seam that I just did. I'm pulling out the first one. And I could have done this beforehand, before I did that second seam, but I don't really think it's necessary. All I have to do is just, unpick to that point right there. Okay, then I'm going to set the seams, grab my larger scissors and trim off an approximate 1/4 inch. I don't want to go too small, but you don't want to go too large, but you really don't have to measure. If you go too small, it's harder to press those seams open because they want to stand straight up. But if you go too large, there's just a lot more bulk in your block. So you can use a rotary cutter and a ruler to trim if you want to, if you prefer that. But I find an approximate works for me, and it may work for you as well. Okay, so I'm just going to roll those open. Make sure those are pressing open and nothing's folding under. Putting a nice hot iron on there. I'm going to use 2 other clappers that I haven't used so that they're cooled off. And then while that's cooling, now I can grab these. These are 4.5 inch squares. I have already marked those again. I used my little ruler and a pencil, and I just marked one line from corner to corner. Okay, and then I'll just follow this line. So what I'll do with that is lay this right here this way, because I want to sew from corner to corner, lining up like that, and then when that opens up, that's what I'll have, is that segment right there. Okay, so again, you can pin if you'd like. I'm just going to start on the corner, and I'm just simply going to sew on the line starting there, and then I'm going to line up this corner, and we'll see how it works out on the other side. But if it's not quite working out right, we've always got the trusty seam ripper, right? But then once in a while, we all have to use those. Okay, so you just want to make sure that when you're laying this on here, always open it up and make sure, yes, that's what I want to see. You don't want to lay it like this, open it up, and that's not what I want to see, okay? So, I'm going to turn it again, start in the corners. Now line up this corner down here. And if I have these corners lined up, chances are, whoops, I slipped. Chances are that seam's going to meet up in the middle just fine. Okay. Okay, we'll grab this one, do the same thing. And now I'll grab this one, should be cool. And one last seam. Whoops, I forgot to check, so I'll do that now. Yeah. All right. Now here's the moment of truth. Let's see how we did on all 4 of these segments. See, that looks great. That goes right across there on that point. So that one's good. That one's good. That one's a little bit farther down. I'm going to look at that in a minute and see if I need to do another seam. And that one's good. Okay, let me look at this and see. I can see that this square is a little bit crooked. Okay, I think I'm going to unpick this and then I'm going to re-sew it again. So I'll be right back. All right, so I've got these unpicked, and so I'm looking at this block, and it looks to me like it's this easy corner triangle maybe was a little bit crooked or something like that. Maybe this sticks over, and so this makes this off. And so what I should have done, you know, I set my trim it ruler out here, and this is what I usually do. And I just forgot to use it and show you how. But so this is what I do. I take my 4.5 inch, because that's what this is supposed to measure right now. And let me bring it over here and let me see and trim off a little bit, you know, a part of what's off, and see if we can see. So what I want to do with this line is I want to have this lined up right here and this lined up, because I want to see what's crooked. I can see that this is sticking out just a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to trim that off. And this is right here. Yes, I was right. This culprit is just a little bit twisted, but it's okay, because look, this is fixing it right here. And now it's going to measure 4.5. Okay. And so let me stick that back over there. And now this should measure the same as this. So I'm going to go ahead and lay that across there. Okay, and go ahead and sew. And another way that you can test it too is if you want to, if you're worried about a segment, you can grab like a pin and you can stick right there. See on the other side, see where that seam is that you want to meet? Stick that pin in and make sure that that's going to meet. And so you can always do that at this point before you sew. I'm a little bit, it's a little, I don't know if I should say happy that this was off a little bit, but this just gives me the opportunity to, show you different ways to fix things and how I fix things. Okay, so I'm just going to poke that in there. I'm not really going to pin it like that because I feel that it distorts the block, but I know that that is lined up. See, you can see that pin is coming out of that seam. It's right there, and these corners are all lined up. So I should not have a problem. Still going to line up with the corners like I originally did with the other 3 that turned out fine, and just sew straight on the line. And now I know that if I'm going to be on this line right here, I'm not going to have a problem. Now I could sew over the pin, but I'm just going to get to it and take it out. Okay. Continue on. All right, so let's open that up, and that's right on. Okay, so now I'm going to grab the other 3. I'm going to set my seams. So that one already looked pretty smooth, but see this one right here, how sometimes when you sew it can get a few little wrinkles in there. And so that's another reason I really like to set my seams before I trim or before I iron, just to make sure everything's nice and flat. And that's really going to help my block to be accurate. And then when I trim, I'm going to make sure that I turn it over when I trim so that I am trimming correctly. So what I want to do is trim this extra off of here. I want to keep this pink over here. And so just again gonna do an approximate 1/4 inch seam. And because you have all of these seams, if you have to err on one side of being a smaller or larger on this one because of all of the seams, you want to be trim maybe a little bit larger, because again, if they're smaller, they may want to stick up when you go to press them. And now that I know that these are correct, you can always, if you're trimming a bunch of blocks, you can always use this as a template as far as looking at the direction that you want to trim. I hope that makes sense. Which side you want to trim, not which direction, which side of the triangle that you want to trim off. I know I'm doing a lot of chatting as we sew these blocks, but now I will cut as big a square as I can out of these pieces and then put them in my scrappy stash. Okay, so since I've already set the seams, I'm going to go ahead and open these up. I'm going to try not to stretch it, even though they're already sewn, they're still on the bias, so I don't want to, stretch things like that. And I just open it up. Sometimes I'll open it up with the iron just a little bit before I roll those open. Let me set this up over here so I can have room to do all 4 of these. And then I just let this iron sit here for several seconds so it gets nice and hot. Put a clapper directly on there, and then do the same thing with all of these. I always look forward to doing the Riley Blake block challenge. It's fun to do 16 different blocks, different designers, but then you put them all together so each one of them has their own look, and you put them all together, and it's really fun. And I think it's fun that it's a mystery too, that you don't know what the next block looks like. But I do know that I'm doing Mercantile, and of course, as the designers, we know what the quilt looks like because we're the designers, but we're sworn to secrecy. But it's cute. I'll tell you that much, it's cute, if that helps. And so I will be showing on Instagram each week, even though I'm just doing a tutorial on my block. I will be showing on Instagram each Tuesday where there's the block challenge, my block that I did with my fabric choices of Mercantile. In fact, I have the fabrics pulled. Let me show you why those are cooling. I have these fabrics pulled over here because, of course, I can't tell you anything about next week's block, but these are the prints that I'm using. So for my quilt, I'm going to be using this from Mercantile for all of the background blocks. Okay, all of the background in the blocks, and then I'm going to be using this in some of the blocks as a little accent. So on the Riley Blake website, this is just the background as well, but I decided to add kind of a little low volume or a little busy background, what I like to call them busy backgrounds, print instead of that, just to add a little bit more interest. Again, this could have been a background right here. Or, you know, you could add that little florals. So I just kind of like to do that. And then these are the 4 prints from Mercantile that I'll be using in block 2. I really like how those all look together. Okay, let's see what this looks like here. And now we had a tulip, and now we've got a little flower with little buds peeking out. That's how I look at it anyway. Okay, I got my foot tangled up in this cord. There we go. All right, so now all I'm going to do here is, like I mentioned before, is sew this into rows after laying it out, making sure that it's all going the correct direction. Okay, everything's pressed open. When I sew that, I press that open as well. And so I'm just going to go ahead and sew this into a row, sew this into a row, and then I'll sew those 3 rows together, and I'll be right back and show you the finished block. Okay, I'm finished with my vintage charm block in the 10-inch size. Here it is right here, all the seams pressed open. And I love this block. I love how it looks. And again, you can use this for the same background if you wanted to, or add, you know, a fun little print in there just to kind of change it up a little bit. And I can't wait to make the next block 2 next week. And I'll be showing that again on Instagram, on my Instagram. And then for this block right here, I love these big sizes. They're so fun to do something, you know, really fun with just one big block. And so I think I'm thinking what I'm going to do with this is just take more of this background, which is from Mercantile as well, and probably cut 2.5-inch strips or 3.5. Since it's 20 now, you know, it'll finish 26 inches if I cut 3.5-inch strips and just sew around it, and then pick one of these to do the binding, maybe this center print, and do the binding for it, and just make a fun little table topper, or you know, for maybe a coffee table or a farm table or whatever, end table. I think that'll be really fun. So that's what I'm going to do with that one. And so again, I'll leave you the cutting measurements for this 20-inch size and the 10-inch size. I'm so excited to be a part of the Riley Blake Block Challenge again this year, and to, you know, to be I'm proud to be amongst the Riley Blake designers and doing a really fun project together. And so thank you for joining me today in my sewing room, and I'll chat with you later.